Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Magic Lesson number 82. Full-on Libanomancy, or Nisomancy, Libanomancy. In the previous video, the one I just did, I misspoke Libamancy, or perhaps Libramancy, which is book divination, divining by books, rather than divination by the scrying of incense, which is what I'm attempting to discuss. So if you're trying to search the subject for further research, forgive my muddling of the Latin. They all sound similar in English, even though they have various different meanings in their Latin. I do the same thing with Spanish and Italian all the time with words that sound similar with different meanings. I'll end up interjecting them or swapping them out from one another. German and French, too, believe it or not, sound nothing alike. And sometimes I sprechen Deutsch. I wind up, parler français instead. So happily, I sense your balanced, mindful, hopefully unreactive, depolarized awareness of these my wonderfully innocent imperfections as I fall joyfully forward creating these humble little videos. I have to fix the error. I have to go back and actually fix it in YouTube as the title. I think I misspelled it as well as misspeaking it, but Google Libanomancy, Libanomancy, or Livanomancy, Livanomancy, in order to find info on incense divination. Book divination, that's a whole nother thing. Now that we've been over the difference the thing that I did speak about in the previous video correctly, those differences between just sitting in a room and mindlessly asking questions of nothing and looking for supposed signs in the smoke, which is, of course, ridiculous. You'll find stuff like that all over the internet. If the smoke goes right, it means this. If it goes left, it means that. If the incense ash curls this way. Nonsense. But you're not going to find much authentic magic on the internet. So that's why you're going to find that instead. The human mammalian mind rests in a state of passive, devout adoration of pattern recognition. That's how we are wired. And so given any abstract opportunity, it will claim and then report back to you to see all sorts of nonsense, shapes, and messages in something like completely random smoke swirls. That's why I say it's ridiculous. It's like cloud watching. If you look up and ask what type of a pet you're going to get tomorrow or should get tomorrow, and you see a white fluffy bunny in the clouds rather than, a many-hued parrot or a spiked hedgehog, that has more to do with direct, conscious, mindful pattern recognition and what your very awake ego personality is consciously applying to meaning than to any deep trance state access, to the Akashic or to the subconscious or the intuitive wisdom of energetic source, which is interwoven throughout all things. Real magic takes real authentic effort. You really can't just randomly ask a question, glance at whatever series of speculative, impressionistic shapes, and let your mind gleefully create and offer up whatever pattern is most in keeping in that moment or most interesting to, say, your top layer consciousness. And then feel like you've been answered by the gods. So again, just letting your mind wander, not exercising ceremonial preparation before scribbling down whatever first thing pops into your head while you watch incense smoke, that isn't actually Libanomancy. That isn't to say that you can't get great ideas that way or communicate with other planes, but that isn't Libanomancy. It isn't incense divination, ceremonial incense divination. In fact, that's the same problem a lot of neophytes have when beginning tarot training. Always reacting to or relaying the first most obvious thing, sometimes symbols. It's an obvious top layer process imaging that pops into the conscious mind, given the pictorial status presented. Or perhaps the second slightly odder interpretation of a tarot card when they take that, non-intuitive feedback that they're misrepresenting to themselves and then pull it apart a bit or warp it to seem more appealing to their own cognition, not letting their minds truly clear first and then open to the peaceful, powerful presence of genuine intuition successfully. It's not a simple thing. It's not always a fast thing to learn this skill, at least not at first. And even later, when someone does become very honed at dropping into a high vibrational state, a trance state, often there is no message at all to be brought back or interpreted. Sometimes it's just a wonderful moment to reflect and engage, in thankfulness of the all. Half the time, you're doing it right because nothing arises and your questions aren't answered at all, directly or indirectly. That's very common among real magi. And again, you're not going to see that spoken about on most of the internet, that real divination, 9 times out of 10 returns with nothing in the form of an answer. To return to one's physical aware self from the astral, from the Akashic, from a tarot plane of understanding and interpretation, or from a very gifted, intuitively attentive scry, having accomplished no inspiring generation of answer, that is very normal. If somebody is actively convincing themselves or others, one of the easiest ways to spot this, right? If you're actively convincing yourself, or if someone else is, of powers egoically, then an answer will always be provided. It will always theatrically present itself to the world. They may even be tricking themselves into thinking an answer is being provided. Again, very common. It's not always easy to tell the difference. But an authentic practitioner, more often than not, is likely to say, try Libanomancy for a full fortnight, a half hour to an hour an attempt on a daily ritualistic basis, usually coming to a ceremonial climax with the full moon subconscious pathways, perhaps using that majestic intuitive reservoir of power to add weight and power to ritual, and come away with nothing at all after all of that work. Or also, very likely, perhaps a jumble of symbols, messages, and reflections, broken sentences that seem to make no sense, stuff that seems chaotically disparate, uninterpretable, or perhaps full of unimportant details, impossible to relay concepts. We are limited by our vessel. And so any information along those lines, that's all pretty useless. And that's normal. Again, for real magic, that's normal. So you can't, prove the relativistic status of the wonderful scry you did because you're talking in broken phrases that make no sense about nothing at all. That doesn't mean the scry wasn't legitimate, but in common magic, in most magic, you're going to find people always come back with answers. It always makes perfect sense or can be interpreted. Usually in genuine magic, that's not the case. It's a common struggle to have uninterpretable messages given. We really are in a very specific type of box. When you talk about being in a box, on this plane, we are boxed in, we are limited, and that can make conceptualization of higher or lower thought patterning, energetic patterning, quite impossible for us most of the time, even when we do gain access to those patterns. We can't always bring it back here in a useful way. And it isn't always an on-call ability. Real magic isn't always working. You're going to do rituals. You're going to try. You're going to be honing your will, honing your intention. You're going to be energetically pouring emotion into your ceremony, and it's not going to work, right? So this isn't always, a snap your fingers thing. Although when we admirably train with rituals daily to articulate our own self-imposed forms of thoughtfully articulated conditioning, that is exactly what we are attempting to accomplish to make it an on-call thing, trying to encourage and reinforce those subtle energies in a trustworthy way so that they are available to us. But you have to keep in mind that the more you need it for something, for anything, the more you need to accomplish something with magic, the more likely you are to get in your own way and stop energies, intuitive or otherwise, from presenting themselves usefully to you or making themselves known or available. Magic power resides in authority. I've been over this. Power resides within genuine magic, in command, in extraordinary, fearless, dedicated, and constant rulership of the space, of the magician's self, in a steadfast attentiveness towards cultivating a mastery, right? A mastery of the self, not in need or begging. So when you feel like you really need an answer, that's when you're most likely not to get one. That's a doubt state, an insecure energetic loop, and that's when magic is not going to work for you, because you can't get easily into a passive and accepting state for that universal flow to clearly present itself if you're emotionally engaged and attached, very attached to the reactive necessity of it. And that's not a good or bad thing. It's just, if you very, very, very badly need something, you're emotional about it. You're more likely to be more emotional about it, less likely to actually be able to depolarize yourself, step back, and take control and authority of your magic as having to do with it. I've discussed this aspect of magic before in other lessons. So if you've been following the little videos, in some sort of order on YouTube, you already know what I'm talking about. And sometimes, even if you aren't egoically or emotionally stepping on your own feet magically, answers still will not be given or will not arise in the mind in a discernible way. And that applies to any form of scrying. There are all sorts of good reasons for that. What seems like, a powerlessness or latency or a magical impotency, it isn't really necessarily that you're impotent or that your magic isn't working or that nothing is happening, even though you might be getting nothing back. Very often, it's because someone's magic is so strong in ways that they might not even perceive, because they choose their paths in life intuitively in ways so clear and already being followed to the best of their, current ability already. The path so defined for where they should be in their evolution towards their greatest purpose. Why would deviations from it or further clarity of it be offered in divination? It's here when this happens, and it does happen, that acceptance, for lack of a better word, embracing what is, becomes the lesson. Or if the best thing for the querent, the person asking the question, another reason you might not get answers, if the best thing is for the person seeking the answers perhaps to find them for themselves, or maybe yourself, if you are scrying for yourself, the best thing might be for you not to be given answers, to not know. that might be the only way to accomplish the answer to the question. You see how it can be very much interwoven and wrapped inside of itself? Unless you want to come back and murder your own father and sleep with your own mother. We've all heard the legends. Sometimes it's best not to know because it will interfere or create the divination, the prophecy itself. Or maybe to have to assimilate the answers via experience in real time. And strong magic is going to provide for that, for those safeguards, for you not to find what you're seeking easy access or answers to on purpose. Because it is, not knowing is what you currently need to offer you the best opportunities or to make you a better, more powerful proponent of your own truth seeking or overall evolution. Powerful magic, guides, ascended masters, messages from the astral influencers, your angels. They aren't going to deny a powerful truth seeker's best privilege to figure things out for themselves and learn from them. They're not going to fall into that trap. So if that's the best course of action and your magic is good and strong, what's going to happen is nothing at all. In those instances, it's what looks to us like nothing at all or feels to us like nothing energetically being fed back. You will come away from the scry with absolutely no useful information, no answers. And if the questions aren't worthy, if what you're seeking out isn't worthy, you can be sure, and notice I don't say good or bad, right? Positive or negative poles. We're not applying any of that. I'm just saying worthy of you as a practitioner within your craft, whatever that may be. If the questions you're asking aren't that, then there won't be wise answers rising to the foreground in response. Just egoic pretense, misinterpreted as higher knowledge. If you're intentionally querying about things that are beneath your powers and harmony, you're going to receive answers that are beneath your powers and best possible harmonies as well. Or if you're lucky and you put safeguards in place, no answer at all. But it's not all bad news. So I feel like this has been an entire video about how it doesn't work. It isn't all bad. Let's say you understand all of what I just said and you do work to get into a full trance state. Again, always ritualistically in your safe space first, with a worthy intention for scrying. Then you can receive very real, very helpful information with, divination, with scrying, with incense divination specifically, which I will have to discuss in the next video because my Wi-Fi, if I'm looking at the timer right, is going to take hours to upload anything much longer than this little video. So until next time.